The first camping I ever did was in the 1960s with my dad and a YMCA group called the Indian Guides. As one of 5 kids, it meant a lot to me to get one-on-one time with my dad, and I think he felt the same way. It's where I was first told, leave your campsite better than you found it. As time passed, I realized that rule reflected a more universal ethic of responsibility than simply respect for a campsite. The medical field even had a version. First, do no harm. Years later, I'd discovered that my favorite campsites actually weren't on land. They were in the ocean. They were coral reefs. And when I eventually landed my dream career in marine science, first at Texas A&M and then at NOAA, I found another version of the campsite rule in the words of the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. The law said it was our job to maintain or improve sanctuary ecosystems. Looking back now on 45 years in marine science, 33 of them with NOAA's National Marine Sanctuary Program, I have one regret. I failed my favorite campsites, the coral reefs that I fell in love with in the 1970s. Yes, I know the worldwide coral reef crisis is a collective failure, but protecting them was my job, my dream job. So the loss cuts twice, a professional failure and a personal heartbreak. I retired from NOAA 6 months ago. Retirement is one of life's important milestones, and I thought I'd mark it by doing something I did at another recent milestone when I became a grandfather. My granddaughter's birth 2.5 years ago was life-changing for me. When my daughter went into labor, I felt an irresistible urge to write a welcome to the world letter to our next family member. But the letter evolved as I wrote, and I found myself thanking this unborn child for helping me cross a threshold that I had long dreaded, becoming an old man. So, this talk is another milestone letter to my granddaughter, but a different kind. Dear Sloane, I owe you an apology. I've had a career that would be the envy of anyone who ever wanted to be a marine biologist. Traveling, living underwater, driving submarines, diving, all while studying nature's magic. I enjoyed it so much I felt guilty at times for being so privileged, but I wouldn't have had it any other way or traded it for the world. In retrospect, enjoying my job as much as I did may have been a problem. You see, succeeding in what you want to do isn't the same as succeeding in what you need to do. 48 years ago, I took a tropical ecology course during a January term with a transformative mentor named Clarence Harms at Westminster College. We started a month-long trip to the Caribbean by camping at Cinnamon Bay on St. John. As our ferry crossed the strait from St. Thomas, and I wiped the warm, salty, tropical sea spray from my face, my eyes were open to the possibility of life beyond the icy Lake Erie winter winds of my childhood hometown. I had a second revelation later that day, and it was essentially a full immersion baptism. As soon as we got to St. John, I grabbed my mask, fins, and snorkel, and I rushed to see my first coral reef. My most vivid memory of the day was the kaleidoscope of colors, shapes, and patterns on that reef. At that time, I'd never given a moment's thought to the concept of species diversity, but there was no denying this was it. The rainbow of colors became a flash flood for my brain. Sponges, corals, brittle stars, and sea urchins. Life in technicolor. This was not my monochromatic Lake Erie. In fact, in those days, it was quite the opposite. This place was alive. And the fish, no aquarium I'd ever seen, came close to mimicking this reef. Nothing had prepared me for that day. Or maybe everything had. I was hooked. While I absorbed the dazzling new world around me, I recalled that Dr. Harms had told me, if you listen, you'll see even more. And when I did, an invisible world announced itself. Horton was hearing a who. That's for Sloane. Any of you who have read or been read Dr. Seuss's seminal thesis on cryptofauna. Reefs weren't just colorful, they were loud. Clicks, pops, and fish grunts filled the space, a world alive with sound. I wanted to explore this ocean whoville for the rest of my life. After that magical month in the Caribbean, my commitment never wavered. My specialty eventually became coral reef ecosystem monitoring, and I've kept a close watch on reefs throughout my career, including some in the Florida Keys. Though painful to admit, it's in the 5 decades since those perfect first moments on St. John. Coral reef health has slipped through our fingers like grains of beach sand. On my watch, everything changed. Every year brought bad news and new reasons to worry. Each report read like an obituary, as declining coral cover reflected the withering defenses of reefs being worn down by 1,000 cuts, from mechanical damage by anchors, ships, boats, and divers, to functional stressors like overfishing, overgrowth by algae after the sea urchin die-off in '83, black band, white band, and other diseases, and increasing heat stress and coral bleaching. And when we thought we'd seen the worst, lionfish arrived from the Indo-Pacific. Another mouth to feed, a hungry mouth. Without predators, they ate to their heart's content, decimating native fish populations on many reefs. Nature's still trying to strike a balance and learn how to accommodate these new residents. And what about the animals making all that noise on the reefs of St. John? Like many reefs, they became quieter and quieter as cryptic animals gradually disappeared. And that continues today, hidden from view and with deafening silence. When I first started diving in the tropics in the 1970s, it fascinated me to turn over small rocks and under every one find at least 2 or 3 brittle stars scrambling for cover. 30 years later, in 2007, I did a survey of 360 pieces of rubble around the Aquarius habitat on Conch Reef in the Florida Keys. I found a total of 3 brittle stars. I had to look under 120 pieces of rubble before finding my first brittle star. And that kaleidoscope of colors, it's fading too. The color is left with the loss of sponges and corals and crinoids and snails, and when algae took over after the sea urchins died. I watched as all this unfolded. We all did. We collected data to prove it was happening, but then retreated to our echo chambers to debate things like keystone species, the nuances of species diversity indices, disease etiologies, and the role of reactive oxygen and coral bleaching. That's how we were trained to think. It's how we were trained to talk. To be fair, some scientists spoke out loudly and boldly in defense of coral reefs, even when silence would have been an easier option. To name a few, John Ogden, Tom Bright, Harold Hudson, Jim Porter, Billy Causey, Bill Precht, Phil Dustin, Nancy Knowlton, and Jeremy Jackson. They went to Congress and to the press to beg for action to protect coral reefs. The public spotlight's an uncomfortable place for most scientists, and science communication was not taught when these people carried the colors. But they spoke effectively for us and fought bravely for coral reefs, and we need to thank them for that. Some of them were even able to reach global audiences, along with the likes of Jacques Cousteau, who warned us about the demise of coral reefs as early as the 1970s. And Sylvia Earle, who's been a tireless ocean advocate for as long as I can remember. To an extent, they all succeeded in getting the word out. Public awareness of the plight of coral reefs was fairly high. Yet, while government officials and legislators heard the cries that reefs were in trouble, few actually saw it firsthand, and for whatever reason, competing priorities or perhaps not enough public demand, they didn't take bold enough action. They heard a litany of problems and solutions from scientists. Overfishing and tourism overcrowding had to stop. Pollution from runoff, pollution from sewage, fertilizers, and even sunscreen had to be reduced. And sediments from dredging had to be prevented. There were efforts to control some problems, but never enough to stop the decline. We needed canals dredged, needed docks and hotels built. We wanted golf courses and mansions on the coasts. We wanted to eat local seafood when we visited our favorite islands. And we refused to switch from the fossil fuels that allowed us to do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted, wherever we wanted. And I do mean we. All of us were part of the problem, trapped by our own lifestyles. Ironically, the more we got what we wanted, the less we had what we needed. And where has it brought us? Well, it brought me to this apology to my granddaughter. Sloane, I was wrong to leave you with less. Less than I had, less than you deserve. I took more than my share. I spent too much time enjoying beauty and not enough time defending it. I left the campsite of my career a mess. And it hurts knowing that what I failed to do will become the problem of the innocent. I can't change what's been done, but I do hope I can still help. I want to be an ancestor whose career had purpose and wisdom worth passing on, not one who stole from the future. And I want you to know that I still have hope. Not only do I believe nature is still worth fighting for, but I believe in nature. I believe that reefscapes can become color palettes again, swarming with rainbows of fish, and that the noise will swell again with the critters of Whoville announcing, "We're still here." I have this hope partly because of one place in particular, a place that looks barely any different today than it did 65 years ago when divers first set eyes on it. A place where I like to say that nature is still in charge. It's called the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. And in a world full of struggling coral reefs, this place will take you back in time. When coral cover was first measured on the reef cap at the Flower Gardens in the 1970s, it was a remarkable 47%, almost half the bottom, covered by living coral. Today, 50 years later, it's 60%. It's even higher, over 90%, down around 100 feet. In a world of losses, this place is a miracle. So I can't help but brag just a bit that I and my research team in the 1980s set up the monitoring program at the Flower Gardens, and it's still running today. And I was honored to be the first manager when the banks were designated a National Marine Sanctuary in 1992. A bright spot for me, through an otherwise sobering era, has been playing a part for 45 years helping the Flower Gardens continue to thrive. With more than a little help from nature, I should admit. The Flower Garden's health has a lot to do with isolation. It's 100 miles offshore. Clean water, negligible nutrient pollution, a healthy fish community, low fishing pressure, and limited visitation. It also has strong regulations related to oil and gas development and other human activities. It's no single thing that keeps these reefs healthy. It's all these things. And I believe that's a lesson about stress reduction that can guide conservation and management anywhere. But even at places with more challenging problems than the Flower Gardens, there are things we know that can help. We know what's wrong with many reefs and what can help restore balance. Science has taught us the importance of maintaining robust and diverse fish communities, natural sounds for attracting recruits, clean water, and intact habitats. We've learned valuable lessons from those who came before us in science, the pioneers of coral reef management, and those who rose to fight for change. Silence will not save us, and division will only cripple progress at a time when it's essential to unify. And there are existing and emerging tools that can support science in ways that prior generations could only imagine. Genomics and AI are just two examples. And new energy technologies, renewables, and hopefully soon, other non-polluting energy like fusion that could help us break our hydrocarbon habit and ease the climate stressors that are plaguing current attempts to restore and maintain ecosystems. We know that when we reduce stress, nature responds quickly, especially when we stay out of her way. And the ocean in particular has an extraordinary capacity to recover. And we know the stakes. Those with the gift of eloquence have said it best. Sylvia Earle, no ocean, no life. No blue, no green. And David Attenborough, after decades of service to nature, coming to the same conclusion, saying, the most important place on earth is not on land, but at sea. And at a time when we need it most, we have a whole new generation of commitment in the field of restoration, as well as rapidly evolving technologies to support it. A lot of talented young people are entering the field with new ideas. I'm sure they're as dedicated to the ocean as I've ever been. And with the leadership of people like Andrew Baker, Andy Bruckner, Ian Enochs, and Michelle Johnston, among others, I can't deny my optimism. In the course of my career, I've gained this perspective on humans. Never in Earth's history has a single species so fully transformed so much of the world around it so fast. Human selfishness has profoundly altered and destabilized our planet, putting us in the company of meteors and supervolcanoes. Can we turn that around? And more to the point, can we change enough to put nature back in charge? Our natural aversion to change will make that, no doubt, an uphill battle. But perhaps the more immediate question is this: do we have a choice? Our capacity to alter nature at every scale may leave us with but one option: become stewards or face the consequences. Consider this: wild animals barely factor into our diets anymore. On land, nearly all meat we consume is domesticated, raised behind fences or walls. Ocean fish are the last major source of wild food that we rely on. But overfishing has forced us to take smaller and smaller fish through time. It takes 5 times as much effort to fill a boat with fish today as it did when my dad was a child in the 1930s. Today, over half our seafood comes from aquaculture. Wild catches have been flat for 30 years, while aquaculture has increased more than tenfold. Meanwhile, Earth's population has mushroomed from 2 billion to 8 billion since my dad was a kid, quadrupling demand. Aquaculture is now forced to help fill that gap. Let's not forget that low supply and high demand have caused the collapse of entire civilizations in the past. But what's happening now is affecting a global civilization, not just individual societies. That's the scary, half-empty part. Here's the hopeful, half-full bit. Earth's population should peak in 60 years at just over 10 billion people and start to drop in 80 years. Of course, we'll still have 10 billion mouths to feed. We'll need to change our relationship with the ocean to do that. In our favor, aquaculture, though far from perfect, is very efficient. In the ocean, just over a pound of food can produce a pound of edible meat. On land, it takes 2 to 10 times that much food to do the same. blame it on gravity and warm-bloodedness, which force land animals to burn energy simply to stand up and stay warm. So most of what they eat becomes heat, not meat. Ocean creatures don't have to fight gravity or stay warm, so most of what they eat can become what we call seafood. We've seen that the ocean is not too big to fail, but billions of years of evolution have made it a highly efficient system. And because of that, I believe that's not too big to fix. The ocean will only heal if we take one foot off the gas and the other foot off its neck. But it can heal. I've seen its resilience. For 20 years, I've worked with the Reef Environmental Education Foundation and the Cayman Islands Department of Environment on a Nassau grouper restoration project in Little Cayman. The island probably had a historical carrying capacity for Nassau groupers in the low tens of thousands, based on the size of the island. Starting around 2001, focused fishing on a spawning site that was discovered on the west end of Little Cayman caused the Nassau grouper population to crash, leaving only about 1,500 fish around the entire island. Closures and limits were imposed, and monitoring and other studies by Reef and DOE began. The spawning aggregation is now protected and recovering. After 20 years, numbers have grown by over 5 times and are approaching 10,000 again. That's a rapid increase for a species that takes about 6 years to mature. And the science of the Grouper Moon Project has been accompanied by a variety of education and outreach efforts for both children and adults. It's made a world of difference, including gaining compliance and even support from the fishing community, which reduces the need and the cost for enforcement. It's another lesson worth spreading to other restoration actions. So, Sloane, I hope that you will draw on what we've learned from science and experience, and the lessons of our successes and failures. I hope you'll speak out with clarity and conviction. Show restraint and respect for Mother Nature. Then, trust in her power. If you do these things, you'll leave your campsite, planet Earth, better than you found it, better than I left it. My hope is that you'll see the magic of color, shape, and pattern return to coral reefs. Hear their voices again and watch the fish rainbow dance. And maybe, just maybe, it'll stir a memory of your grandfather's sea stories. And when he told you, the ocean is not too big to fix, because nature still leans toward life, as she always has. And she's crying out for us to listen again.